see this? What determines the price of a thing? What it costs to make? What it costs to buy? The profit margin the seller wants for selling it? Or what it's worth to the buyer? Most entrepreneurs answer the wrong question. Can I challenge you on one of the more popular pieces of business advice that I see circulating on social media? That is, charge what you're worth. I don't believe it's good business. I don't even believe it's biblical, and I'm not sure it's even possible, at least not in 2026. This is the Bible on Business and Influence Bible Study. I'm your host, Dr. Trudy Behrman. I actually have in the studio with me today Patrice Brantley. She's a mental health counselor. Patrice, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me today.
Awesome. So we meet Sundays Eastern, live or later, and this is a PSI TV production. If you happen to be in the Tampa Bay area, just like Patrice is today, join me in the studio. It would be my absolute pleasure to meet you in person, hugs, pray with each other, and have you tap in and participate at some level in delivering the study. So I can record this anywhere in the world, but it is my absolute joy to connect with you in person. So if you can, there will be an RSVP link in the description, however you found this video, and I look forward to connecting with you. This Bible study also has a mobile app. So if you have the app, you can participate anywhere in the world at any time. You have it with you on the go. Also housed in the app is a community which allows us to connect globally with others of like mind and build real relationships. Also housed in the app is the Bible on Business book. It was a bestseller at the time, and the accompanying workbook. The workbook is interactive. So when you go into the app and notate your prayers, your insights, your ahas, it saves it and keeps your progress. So let's see what the Word of God has to say today about becoming an influential leader using biblical principles. It is at this point in the study, I remind you, this is not so much a theological breakdown. For that, I'm going to encourage you to be a Berean, study the Word of God for yourself, or go check in with your spiritual leader or pastor. I tend to go for the biblical principles rather than the theological breakdown. What does that mean? Gravity works whether I'm throwing a stone across the street or I'm trying to make a plane fly. So I'm trying to extract the principles that can work, that we can implement today in 2026. Now, I promise you, though, I'll give you this guarantee. Even when I'm doing a thematic study and I take verses from various places in the Bible, I never take a verse to prove a point. I will always look at the context the verse is housed in, who it's being spoken to, what it's about, before I utilize that verse. I will promise you that. So today's study is titled Pricing and Value Signals, Pricing Strategies Based on Your Goals and the Market. I'm going to play a video, an excerpt from a video. This video was Payless decided to see how people would react to their shoes if they created an upscaled environment. So let me play this just a quick excerpt from you, just to set up this lesson for today.
Payless wondered how much people would pay for our shoes if they didn't know they were our shoes. So we rebranded for a weekend. Insta influencer types open up their wallets for our shoes. We watched from a room backstage as our first customer approached the register. Shoes sold for $250, $400, and even $600. But before any of them left, we let them know the shoes were actually from Payless.
What's knowing?
How do you think these people feel when they learned about this experiment? Will they complain the Payless price that they gladly paid was too high, considering they were actual Payless shoes? Proverbs 20 verse 14 says, the customer always complains the price is too high, but then he goes off and brags about the bargain he got. A bit of sales psychology right there, pricing psychology. You see, the seller sets the price. the buyer argues about the price. Even though the buyer argues about the price, they walk away saying it was a bargain. Now, if he brags about the bargain, was the price really too high? Let's watch another video clip on pricing.
For a week. What would you have paid? 600, and you would have taken. Or 75. So we made a good deal. Yeah.
The Bible is so kind to share so much wisdom so that in 2026, we can understand pricing and value are both in the eye of the beholder. Did you pick it up from both videos? The price and the value were in the eye of the beholder. So a seller may want to charge whatever they want, but the value and the value that is matched to the price is truly in the eye of the beholder. So let's talk about pricing strategies. So those of you who used to be employees that recently moved into the entrepreneurial space, or for those of you who have been in the game for a while, but your margins are so razor thin that you're not doing Walmart volume. So let's get into what the Bible has to say about business and influence and what it shares around this theme. I promise you, the Bible and God and the kingdom are very pro-commerce, very pro-business. So I went to Bible Gateway and I entered the keyword sell. In the King James Version, there are 47 Bible texts that use that word. The first story is where Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. Patrice, would you read for me Genesis 25, verses 29 through 34?
Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." That is why it is called Edom. Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." "Look, I am about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright.
The birthright was sold for some stew. Now that's a very low price for a birthright in terms of what it was valued in the future. But you see, Esau rationed that if he were dead, the birthright would have absolutely no value to him. So to him, the exchange at that moment made sense. But hold that thought for a minute. You see, in the Hebrew experience, in the patriarchal age of that time, the birthright in Hebrew is Bekorah. And it was a sacred and valuable inheritance tied to the firstborn because it carried material, leadership, and spiritual significance. Material and legal value. It had a double portion of inheritance. You can check that in Deuteronomy 21:17. It was headship of the family. And it was also covenant stewardship, the right to represent the family in dealings with God and other men. So the birthright was actually extremely valuable, but it was a future value. The stew was very valuable to a hungry Esau right now. And many of us trade a fabulous future for an okay now. However, price and value are never the same thing. Price will only make sense to a buyer in relation to their perceived value for the thing. So let me read Genesis 37, verses 27 to 28 for you. "Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianite merchants, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver." Now, slavery has been a scourge on history. Now, I'm from Jamaica, and Jamaica abolished slavery 50 years before America did. 50 years is approximately 2 generations ahead of America. And that was what triggered Bob Marley to sing the words, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." You see, the thing is, the psychological impact of slavery was still prevalent even after people were free. And in my opinion, as a Jamaican living in America, I think sometimes I still see that evidence having an impact in America still today. So my point here is the value of a human life, the value of a human life should never be calculated in dollars. And it just makes no sense here that Joseph's brothers were accepting 20 pieces of silver for their brother. How do you put a price on human life? Come on now. I mean, really. And this brings me to a pet peeve of mine. I have seen many posts on social media saying, "Pay me what I'm worth," or "I charge what I'm worth." Here's a LinkedIn post I recently responded to along those lines. It says, LinkedIn post was publicly posted, so I don't feel like I'm, doing anything here. I'm sharing you what she posted publicly on LinkedIn. It says, "Know your worth, then add tax." But I responded to that. I'm like, you're selling yourself? Because if you were really charging what you're worth, what would that number actually be? As far as I know, we're not selling ourselves anymore. So the marketplace was never meant to assign a dollar value to a person or to the person's worth. The marketplace exists to exchange value. And when money becomes the reward for creating value, you can use that reward to create even more value for the people that we serve. The marketplace exists to exchange value, and people are never a commodity. So if you're not charging based on your worth, and the price might be haggled, because remember what the Bible said, the price might be haggled by a buyer who actually pays it, then thinks it's a bargain, or you underprice or you underprice like Esau did because he wanted a quick exchange, then what is the ideal pricing strategy? And more importantly, one that matches biblical principles. So number one, your price should not be set to cheat others. Patrice, would you read Proverbs 16, verse 11 for me?
Honest scales and balances belong to the Lord. All the weights in the bag are of his making.
Okay, and in another translation, it says, all the weights of the bag are his concern. God cares about this stuff. We are not to price to cheat people. Here's another one in Proverbs 20, verse 23. Differing weights are an abomination to the Lord, and a false scale is not good. So your price should not be set to cheat others. Number two, your price should reflect a fair value exchange. Patrice, would you read Leviticus 25, verse 50 for me?
They and their buyer are to count the time from the year they sold themselves up to the year of Jubilee. The price for their release is to be based on the rate of pay to the hired worker for the number of years.
Okay, so back in the day, the Jews had slaves, and very often the slaves they had were other Jews. But here's the thing, that slavery back then was not racially triggered. It was an economic situation. So a lot of times in this case, Jews would, when they were in hard times, they would sell themselves to their brothers, to others in the Jewish community as indentured workers. They would work for their time, work for their meals, work for shelter over their head in exchange. But their value, the value of that time was in relation to how many years to Jubilee. The longer to Jubilee meant the person would get more out of that person. But at Jubilee, they had to be released. So Jubilee was a cutoff point. But this was a whole different type of slavery than seems to be existing even today with sex trafficking. So let's just be clear about that. So Jews who fell upon hard time would sell themselves to other Jews, and this was not racially determined. This was an economic transaction, and the price was based on how many years to Jubilee. And their freedom was guaranteed. The more years to Jubilee, the higher the price. So number 2, your price should reflect a fair value exchange. Number 3, luxury pricing is a thing. Luxury pricing is a thing. Your products, your community, your commodities, your things. Let me tell you what Matthew 13 verse 46 says. Patrice, would you read Matthew 13 verse 46 for me?
Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of a great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it.
Luxury items are not only expensive, but valued above all other things. This man sold all he had. Can you imagine selling your car, your house, jewelry, whatever it is, to buy, in this case, a pearl? Something so valuable to this man that it was worth every single dollar he could get his hands on, even if it meant a complete liquidation of his assets. So let me read Ezekiel 27 verse 22 to you. The traders of Sheba and Ramah traded with you. They exchanged for your wares the best of all kinds of spices and all precious stones and gold. You see, value and exchange is the thing. You want to be exchanging value. So I want to tell you that value does not actually mean you have to trade it for money. So in this case, you're trading it for spices and other things. When I worked at Air Jamaica, I saw them trade first-class destination tickets for other services of equivalent value, whether it was an ad in BET magazine or something like that. So, Patrice, would you read Matthew 25, verse 16 for me?
The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more.
So you see, your price should deliver profit to you. And in this case, the manager, who the Bible says was a good and faithful servant, his manager increased what God had entrusted to him, or the master had entrusted to him, by 100%. Your price, whatever that is, should deliver profit to you. So consulting, if you're in that space, is very interesting because the value in the consulting space is subjective. So let me read Daniel 2 verse 48. It says, "Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon." Over all the wise men of Babylon. You see, wise men existed in Babylon, but somehow the king had determined that Daniel was wiser than them all. And because he determined that Daniel was wiser than them all, it gave Daniel status, power, and more wealth than the other wise men. So, Patrice, would you read for me 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 through 3? 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 through 3.
When the queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relationship to the Lord, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. Arriving at Jerusalem with a great caravan with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold, and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all of her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her.
Can you jump to verse 10 and read verse 10 for me?
And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spice, and precious stones. Never again was so much spices brought in as those Queen of Sheba, gave to King Solomon.
Now, 120 talents of gold. If you have any clue what an ounce of gold costs today, we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars that she brought to the king to consult with him, as did many other rulers of the time. She was not the only one who came to seek Solomon's wisdom, and Solomon even had recurring income because it happened year upon year. So Solomon didn't become wise because people paid him. People paid him because they recognized the value of his wisdom. So before we wrap this up for the evening, Patrice, did you have any thoughts, any takeaways, anything?
So I had a couple. I really love the last one that you gave, where you said people paid Solomon because of the value of his wisdom. It wasn't that he had all of this, he had the most important thing, which was the wisdom to give people so that he could be provided for. I love how you broke down even learning how to exchange in your day. You're not just exchanging money, you're exchanging the money for the value that you're being given. I love how you talked about at the beginning, you talked about how the birthright and all that it was. You even talked about the Korah and that it was the material, the legal, and the value, and that we had to understand that you don't get caught up in the quick now, but you look towards what the future is going to bring.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. So, for those of you who have listened live or later, God gives people their worth. God gives us our worth. Not man, not the amount of money we have, not the zip code we live in. God gives us our worth. The marketplace, on the other hand, offers their price. So regardless of whatever price you want to sell something for, like in the Payless Palessi experience, the same shoe commanded both the expensive price and the cheap price, because price and value are in the eye of the beholder. So price and value are not the same thing. Don't confuse the two. Serving people is a mission, and serving people is the mission. So money is simply a mechanism, a tool. Use that money to fulfill your mission. The marketplace exists to exchange value. People are never the commodity. So let me just run over those points again really quickly. Number one, your price should not be set to cheat others. Number two, your price should reflect a fair value exchange. Number three, luxury pricing is a thing. And number four, your price should deliver you a profit. Patrice, thank you for joining me in the studio today. I'm your host, Dr. Trudy Behrman. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to connecting and possibly working with you.